Chapter 361 I'm going to call you Daddy. When Jian Dongming came over to greet Jian Yun did not recognize him for a moment. Ever since her mother was seriously injured, Jian Dongming had avoided them. It had been more than 6 years since she last saw Jian Dongming. It had been 6 years. She did not expect to see him again at such an occasion, and it was very obvious that Jian Dongming came to find her. Jian Yun stared at Jian Dongming. Her memories of him still lingered on 6 years ago. Her mother was seriously injured and needed money to treat. She went to ask for money from him but was chased out by Jian Dongming and Lin Rong. At that time, Jian Dongming was extremely cruel. She would never forget the coldness in his eyes when Jian Dongming slapped her face and coldly told her and her mother to get out of his life. As time passed, the situation changed. At this time, she was dressed in fine clothes and wore expensive jewelry. She stood there and attracted the attention of tens of thousands of people. This nominal father of hers had once been high and mighty, but now he was hunched over, rubbing his hands and looking at her with, "This is?" someone asked. "My surname is Jane." Jian Dongming saw that Jian Yun did not greet him and could not help but look a little embarrassed. He did not directly say his relationship with Jian Yun, but said his surname was something. Sure enough, there was someone who liked it. His eyes flickered. His surname is Jane. This surname is rarely seen. Could it be that this Mr. and Mrs. Huo are? Jian Yun could roughly guess the reason Jian Dongming came to look for her. But today was different from the past. She had the support of Huo Liancheng. She did not have anything to fear for someone like Jian Dongming, who did not differentiate right from wrong and did not have any kinship. Furthermore, Jian Yun was certain that Jian Dongming would not dare to cause trouble in such an occasion. So she only smiled faintly and said, "This is my father." "So you are Mr. Wo's father-in-law. I apologize for my disrespect." The surrounding people immediately put away the doubt on their faces and went forward to shake hands with Jian Dongming to greet him. "No problem, no problem." Ever since Jian Dongming's failed business a few years ago, he had encountered many obstacles everywhere. He had gone from a glorious place to a place where no one paid attention to him when he went out. Suddenly, he was complimented by so many successful people. In this world of clothes and hair, he felt a little light-headed for a moment. He also raised his posture as an old man. He straightened his back and spoke with confidence. Those people who were unaware of the situation started to surround Jian Dongming. Jian Yun just happened to be able to escape. Coincidentally, she saw Huo Liancheng and Elder Bai descend from the stairs, and she bore. If it was possible, she didn't want to see Jian Dongming. No matter if it was the way he treated her in the past or the way he was now bowing and groveling, Liancheng. Jian Yun held Huo Liancheng's hand and went to say hello to Elder Bai. "Hello, Elder Bai." Although Elder Bai had a bad opinion about Huo Liancheng marrying a commoner girl, Huo Liancheng was not his grandson after all, and he had no right to make the decision. He just felt sorry that his granddaughter liked Huo Liancheng. After so many years, it was hard for her to even see Huo Liancheng. "Hello." Elder Bai had lived for so many years and was a smart person. He was very polite to Jian Yun. He saw many people gathered in front of him, so he asked, "What happened over there? Why are there so many people?" Huo Liancheng saw Jian Dongming in the crowd at first glance. He lowered his head and saw Jian Yun pursed her lips and her face was cold and stubborn. "Grandpa Bai, excuse me for a moment." Huo Liancheng greeted Elder Bai and led Jian Yun to the side. He asked her in a low voice, "Are you unhappy to see your father?" "Yes." Jian Yun did not hide anything and said quietly, "I have not seen him for more than 6 years. No matter how I looked for him in the past, he did not see me. He was afraid that I would ask him for money. Now it is the other way around. It is my turn to avoid him." Hiding is not a solution. There is a problem that needs to be solved. Right? Have they settled their divorce? Huo Liancheng placed a strand of Jian Yun's hair on her cheek behind her ear and gently brushed her skin with his finger. "Yesterday I asked Lawyer Lei. He said that they have divorced." After a pause, Jian Yun sneered and continued, "Previously it was my mother who refused to divorce and she was unwilling to sign. Now it is my father who is unwilling to leave. I heard from Lawyer Lei that he used some methods to settle it." Jian Yun was talking when she suddenly felt Huo Liancheng pinch her hand. She looked up at him and looked up. She saw Jian Dongming separating the crowd and walking over anxiously. "Mr. Jane?" Huo Liancheng greeted her lightly. He could not be familiar with anyone other than Jian Yun, even if this person was her father. Jian Dongming was not happy with this unfamiliar title. "Liancheng, since you and Jian Yun are married," he said, "then we're a family. You should call me Papa." Huo Liancheng's face was cold and expressionless. Jian Yun patiently said, "Dad, if you have anything to say, just say it." "You little girl, this is the first time Liancheng and I have met. It's fine if you don't introduce us, but why are you still talking like that?" Jian Dongming was very dissatisfied with Jian Yun. He hated Jian Yun very much. Now that she was so rich, any piece of jewelry she sold would be enough for him to deal with emergencies. She was not willing to help him. It was really hateful. Jian Yun turned her face away and did not say anything. Although she really wanted to drag Huo Liancheng away, if that was the case, there would definitely be rumors everywhere. It was estimated that it would spread throughout the social circle of Qinghu City by tomorrow. Be it her or Huo Liancheng, it would not affect them. Mr. Jian, would you like to go over there? Huo Liancheng held Jian Yun's hand tightly. His voice was still faint. However, he could invite Jian Dongming. It's very kind of you. Of course, Huo Liancheng was giving Jian Yun face. After all, he didn't want the rumors to be bad for her. She was the treasure in his palm. Good. Good. Jian Dongming was overjoyed when he heard this. He rubbed his hands repeatedly. As long as Huo Liancheng was willing to give him time, even if he could not get an investment from him, he could still rely on this relationship to go out. Those who looked down on him would definitely give Huo Liancheng face. The waiter led them to a quiet corner. There were 2 sofas here. Jian Yun and Huo Liancheng had just sat down when they heard Lin Lanlan's artificial voice from behind. Dad, why are you here? Dad? Lin Lanlan's voice was natural. Jian Yun's lips curled up coldly, but she did not even turn her head. Jian Dongming turned his head in shock. When he saw Lin Lanlan, his eyes lit up. He pulled Lin Lanlan excitedly and turned to introduce her to Huo Liancheng. Liancheng, come, let me introduce you. This is my other daughter and also Jian Yun's elder sister. I don't have an elder sister. Jian Yun suddenly stood up. Her brows were vertical, and her small face was full of coldness. She stared at Jian Dongming and said word by word, Dad, I still call you Daddy now because I respect you. But there are some things that can't be wiped out without you mentioning. Chapter 362. Put that face of yours away. Jian Yun, what did you say? Jian Dongming had already confirmed the DNA test report and thought that Jian Yun was not his biological daughter. So when he heard Jian Yun say this, he also became angry and spoke rudely. Lanlan is my daughter. There is no doubt about this. Jian Yun originally did not want to argue with Jian Dongming in this kind of situation, but she was really angry in her heart. However, she could not help but sneer and said the words hidden in her heart. Then, can I understand that Mr. Jane means that she is your daughter? I am not. Jian Dongming's eyelids twitched when he heard that. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Jian Yun. He saw that her expression was cold. Clearly she was not joking. He looked at Huo Liancheng, who was sitting there with his hands clasped and his face cold. His heart skipped a beat and he thought to himself, this is bad. He had long heard that Huo Liancheng was very interested in Jian Yun. They would get married because Huo Liancheng was chasing after Jian Yun. Looking at Huo Liancheng's appearance tonight, he doted on Jian Yun very much. From Jian Yun's clothing, one could tell that if he offended Jian Yun now, it would be offending Huo Liancheng. Then why did he go through so much trouble and thick skin to find Jian Yun? One must know that during this period of time, in order to be able to see Jian Yun, he had used all kinds of methods. But he could not get close to the place where she lived. His cell phone number had stopped working again. Even if his cell phone did not stop working, she would not pick up his phone. Originally, he wanted to ask Jian Yun for help by doing Ouyang Fei's thinking work. Who would have thought that Ouyang Fei, this woman's brain, was like a rock? She shamelessly did not divorce for 6 years. She suddenly became enlightened after a serious illness and took the initiative to propose a divorce. At this time, he did not want to get a divorce. Jian Dongming was calculating in his heart. These years, he did not treat Jian Yun and her daughter well and did not fulfill his duty. It was inevitable that Jian Yun hated him. If he and Ouyang Fei were to divorce now, Jian Yun would definitely be even more reluctant to talk to him. Now that she was on a higher branch, he did not want to let go of this opportunity. As long as he did not divorce, he would still be Huo Liancheng's father-in-law. Huo Liancheng still had to give her some face. But what made Jian Dongming angry was also this. He did not know who Ouyang Fei found, or perhaps it was Jian Yun who found the person. Under the circumstances where he did not agree, she directly applied for a divorce in court. However, no matter how angry Jian Dongming was in his heart, he did not dare to show it too clearly on the surface. His face twitched, and he forcefully suppressed his anger. The corner of his mouth curled up into a smile and kindly comforted Jian Yun. What nonsense are you talking about, girl? How can you not be my daughter? All right, Lanlan, you go to the side. I have something important to discuss with Liancheng. After saying that, Jian Dongming gave Lin Lanlan a look. Although Lin Lanlan was unwilling, she also understood that Jian Yun was very sexual. If she stayed any longer, she would not get any benefits. So Lin Lanlan could only turn around and leave unwillingly. Before she left, she deliberately pretended to be patient after she was angry. She smiled gently at Huo Liancheng. Mr. Huo, I'm sorry to make you laugh. Huo Liancheng slightly raised his eyelids. His handsome face did not show any expression, and his eyes were cold as well. Lin Lanlan's heart suddenly trembled. Even though she was treated coldly, her heart was still fiercely stirred by Huo Liancheng's face. At the same time, jealousy and hatred also surged in her heart. Why was such a perfect man Jian Yun's people? Let's go. Jian Dongming saw that Lin Lanlan was still dawdling and could not help urging her. Lin Lanlan turned her head back 3 times and left. Her eyes had always been on Huo Liancheng's face, but other than when she spoke just now when Huo Liancheng slightly raised his eyelids, he did not look at her again. Lin Lanlan could not help but feel disappointed. She also wondered if Huo Liancheng did not like her current delicate appearance. Lin Lanlan could not help but think, Did she have to change her character again, or did she have to walk the fiery path when she was overseas again? On this side, Lin Lanlan's thoughts were overwhelmed with emotions. She seemed to be able to see Huo Liancheng being mesmerized by her until he was dizzy and unable to stop his desire. From then on, he hated Jian Yun. Suddenly, someone stood up, in front of her. Lin Lanlan looked up and her eyes lit up. She said happily, "Haiyan, you are here too?" Shu Haiyan's expression was gloomy. He pulled Lin Lanlan's wrist and pulled her to the balcony. He asked her coldly, "What do you want to do again?" Lin Lanlan was surprised. "What happened to me?" Shu Haiyang snorted and pointed in Jian Yun's direction. He said bluntly, "Don't you want to use the same old trick again to destroy Yunduo's marriage?" Lin Lanlan's eyelids twitched, but soon tears welled up in her eyes. She said with grievance, "Am I that bad in your heart? I am just going to greet her. How could it be that I am going to destroy her marriage? Besides, if her marriage was stable, how could I destroy it just because I wanted to?" Shu Haiyang turned his head and sneered, "Put away your face. I was really bewitched by you back then. You know what you are up to. I'm warning you, don't get close to Yunduo again." When Lin Lanlan heard this, she could not help but laugh. There were still tears on her face, but she did not look like the smile at the corner of her mouth was sarcastic. "What did you say back then?" "You said Jian Yun did not understand the style and was like a piece of wood. It was very boring. You said that you just liked me. You are so coquettish and cheap. Don't tell me you have forgotten all these words." "Shut up." Shu Haiyang's handsome and refined face was covered with a layer of anger. He clenched his fists tightly and his eyes turned red. "What right do you have for me to shut up? A fly does not bite a seamless egg. The one who really hurt Jian Yun is you. What right do you have to scold me now?" Lin Lanlan sneered. "For so many years, you have lied to yourself. On one hand, you are drunk overseas, and on the other hand, you hope that Jian Yun is still waiting for you. But when you come back and take a look, your goddess actually found a man who is 100 times more outstanding than you. So you want. I told you to shut up." Shu Haiyang was furious. He slapped Lin Lanlan on the face. However, Shu Haiyang's arm and leg had not recovered from the car accident. Lin Lanlan moved to the side and dodged it. Shu Haiyang could not stand steadily. He rushed forward and was about to fall down. "Haiyang, are you okay?" Lin Lanlan quickly reached out to support Shu Haiyang with a concerned look on her face. When she saw Shu Haiyang's angry look, she also felt a bit regretful. In fact, Lin Lanlan admitted that she still had feelings for Shu Haiyang. Whether it was his family background or appearance, although Shu Haiyang and Huo Liancheng could not be compared, he could be considered a man with good conditions. Although she had snatched this man from Jian Yun back then, she did indeed like him. Chapter 363: A Third Person Who Destroys Marriage. If Shu Haiyang didn't hate her so much, Lin Lanlan would still be willing to follow him. Even if she could not live a luxurious life, it did not matter. However, Shu Haiyang's attitude towards her made her heart turn cold. Lin Lanlan caressed Shu Haiyang. She was very close to him, so close that she could feel his skinny body. "Go away." Shu Haiyang's chest rose and fell violently. He grabbed the balcony railing and threw Lin Lanlan away, not letting her support him. He had always been gentle and refined. He would never speak so harshly. At this time, he had also been stabbed by Lin Lanlan's words into the most secret corner of his heart. That was why he had lost his composure. Yes, it was because he was too confident, or perhaps it was because he was too stupid. He always thought that he understood Jian Yun, and thought that Jian Yun would still be waiting for him on the Lexth. Only now did he know regret. "Haiyang, don't be angry. All right, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that." Lin Lanlan sighed and paused. She rolled her eyes and said, "Look, I have listened to you for so many years and did not look for Jian Yun. But now, my father's economy has encountered problems and Jian Yun is not willing to help. I can't just watch my father fall into poverty. Also, my mother is in prison. I have no choice. If you can't do anything, then you have to rob a man?" Shu Haiyang looked at Lin Lanlan mockingly. He felt that he must have been blind back then. Why would he choose Lin Lanlan and give up on Jian Yun? Besides, Uncle Jane was so heartless to Jian Yun. Why should he ask Jian Yun to help him now? Also, don't think that I don't know. Uncle Jane will be like that. You and your mother have contributed a lot in the future. I don't want to destroy Jian Yun's marriage. My mother and I didn't say anything either." Lin Lanlan frowned, and the gloominess in her eyes disappeared. She suddenly looked at Shu Haiyang and asked, "Haiyang, since you love Jian Yun so much, why don't you fight for it? How about we cooperate? I like Huo Liancheng and you love Jian Yun. As long as they break up, we can get what we need. Isn't that good? Are you crazy?" Shu Haiyang heard this and looked around in shock. Seeing that there was no one around, he felt relieved. Then he looked at Lin Lanlan as if he was looking at a madman. "Do you know what you are talking about?" Lin Lanlan shrugged. She looked like she did not care. "Of course I know. I am only asking you now. Do you want to cooperate?" Shu Haiyang's eyes flashed and seemed to be wavering, but then he sneered. "It's useless. Give up." He looked at Lin Lanlan and did not hide the sarcasm in his tone. "Do you think a man like Huo Liancheng will like you?" Lin Lanlan was indignant. She took a step forward and puffed out her chest. "Why not? Jian Yun is not much prettier than me." Shu Haiyang shook his head. Do you think Huo Liancheng fell in love with her because Jian Yun is pretty? Then why? Lin Lanlan asked. She was very anxious right now. Every time she saw Huo Liancheng, she felt that she had fallen in love with him. She swore that he must have this man, no matter what methods he used. I don't know. Xu Haiyang's face was filled with loneliness. He was telling the truth. He did not know what had happened between Jian Yun and Huo Liancheng, but he could feel that Huo Liancheng had a deep love for Jian Yun. A man like Huo Liancheng could not only care about appearances. Could it be that you have decided to watch Jian Yun having sex under another man? Lin Lanlan frowned and decided to add fuel to the fire. She thought she knew Jian Yun very well. Even if Jian Yun did not love Xu Haiyang now, they had grown up together. That relationship was still there. If Xu Haiyang could interfere, even if it did not have much effect, it could at least cause cracks to appear in the relationship between Jian Yun and Huo Liancheng. At that time, she would have a chance. Don't say any more. Xu Haiyang closed his eyes in pain. Ever since he did that thing to drug her, he no longer had the face to fight for Jian Yun. At that time, his head was really pinched by the door. How could he think of such a despicable method? After that, when he chatted with Luo Yanyan, he found out that Jian Yun had not had a boyfriend for so many years. Luo Yanyan also hinted to him that Jian Yun was still pure and had never forgotten about him. If he tried to fight for her back then and not just walk away, there would be no news of her for many years. Then, it was very likely that Jian Yun would still accept him. However, it was all too late now. Xu Haiyang shook his head and smiled sadly. Lin Lanlan, I will give you one last word of advice. Don't set fire to yourself. Huo Liancheng, you can't afford to offend him. Lin Lanlan looked down on Xu Haiyang's cowardice, but she did not show it on her face. She just smiled faintly. Then let's wait and see. What do you want to do? Xu Haiyang saw Lin Lanlan's expression. Something was not right. He was shocked. He knew Lin Lanlan's character very well. She was very scheming and would never give up until she achieved her goal. Could it be that she really wanted to ruin Jian Yun and Huo Liancheng's marriage? Don't care what I want to do. Lin Lanlan smoothed her hair and her face returned to that delicate look. She smiled. Is there anything else? If there is nothing else, I will take my leave first. Finishing, without waiting for Xu Haiyang to reply, Lin Lanlan had already turned around and left. In her heart, she did look down on Xu Haiyang. Even when she had tried all means to snatch him from Jian Yun back then, this man was really too weak. Furthermore, he did not have any opinions. Furthermore, he had a very powerful mother. Even if she could marry him, she would probably not have a good life after marriage. So until the last step, Xu Haiyang was her last choice. Xu Haiyang looked at Lin Lanlan's back and frowned. He was wondering if he should go and remind Jian Yun and just watch. If Lin Lanlan could really cause a crack between Jian Yun and Huo Liancheng, then, at the same time, Jian Yun, Huo Liancheng, and Jian Dongming sat opposite each other. Because Lin Lanlan's appearance just now caused the atmosphere to become cold and awkward. Jian Yun's face was gloomy and she did not say anything. Huo Liancheng had always been used to being cold and aloof. Only Jian Dongming was restless. Although he had thought it through very well before he came, he would act like his father-in-law when he saw Huo Liancheng. As long as Huo Liancheng had some eyesight, he would not be too cold to him. However, what Jian Dongming did not expect was that Huo Liancheng's aura was really too strong. It was so strong that he, who had been in a business world for a long time, felt a chill in his heart. Especially when Huo Liancheng looked at him, he actually felt cold sweat on his back. He did not dare to look directly at Huo Liancheng. Mr. Jian, you're looking for me. Don't tell me you want to sit here like this. Huo Liancheng held Jian Yun's hand tightly. He knew that the woman called Lin Lanlan was the one who destroyed the relationship between Jian Yun and Xu Haiyang. Chapter 3364. Fury Huo Liancheng also knew that Lin Lanlan was the daughter of Jian Dongming and Lin Rong, but this was the first time he saw Jian Yun lose her temper in the face of this matter. It seemed that she really minded her relationship with Lin Lanlan. No. Jian Dongming rubbed his hands and thought for a while before he cautiously opened his mouth. Mr. Huo, the reason I came to find you is because of the matter with my company. I want to ask you to purchase my company. Jian Dongming did not dare to get close to Huo Liancheng anymore. He could tell that Huo Liancheng would give him a chance to meet him tonight because Jian Yun was here. The person he always called him was also Mr. Jane. He did not have the intention of following Jian Yun to call him father. If it was an ordinary person, Jian Dongming might have scolded him for not respecting his elders, but he did not have the confidence to do so to Huo Liancheng. Moreover, he had come this time. Someone who needs help. Huo Liancheng saw that Jian Yun was about to explode again and quickly pinched her small hand. He narrowed his eyes and smiled indifferently. Mr. Jian, my company should have told you very clearly about the acquisition of the company. Jian Dongming became anxious when he heard that. Mr. Huo, they said that my company does not have any purchasing value. How is that possible? Please consider it again. Speaking of this, Jian Dongming deliberately looked at Jian Yun. The meaning was very obvious. Today he wanted to borrow his daughter's relationship to rely on Huo Liancheng. Jian Yun could not help getting angrier when she saw how shameless Jian Dongming was. However, Huo Liancheng did not let her speak. She knew that he definitely had his own ideas, so she forced herself to suppress the anger in her heart. She lowered her head and sat there without saying a word. Mr. Huo, although my company wasn't big, it was still effective in Boshan a few years ago. Very good. However, the economy hasn't been good for the past 2 years. It's not that the company has a problem. We're in urgent need of funds to maintain it. As long as we have funds, we'll definitely be able to make a profit. Only you can save me. Jian Dongming looked at Huo Liancheng expectantly and spoke very sincerely. He did not know if he could fool Huo Liancheng by avoiding the heavy burden like this, but he was already at a dead end. He could only take a gamble. However, the way Huo Liancheng looked at him made Jian Dongming feel guilty. Huo Liancheng's hand was still holding Jian Yun's 10 fingers, and his other hand was on the arm of the sofa. When he heard Jian Dongming's words, he gently tapped the sofa with his long fingers. His eyes were narrowed, and his entire body was covered with a layer of aura that was not angry but powerful. Mr. Huo, can you think about it a little more? Jian Dongming saw that Huo Liancheng didn't speak for a long time, and his sharp eyes flashed with a light that he didn't understand. Jian Dongming but wiped the cold sweat off his head and waited for a while. The atmosphere became more and more stagnant, as if it was frozen. Jian Dongming could not help but recall the evaluation of the outside world about Huo Liancheng. This man's achievements today did not only depend on his family. His own extraordinary ability and extraordinary insight were the most terrifying. Especially in the past few years, he did not care about his own company and was a professional manager everywhere. He had saved the company that was on the verge of bankruptcy time and time again. Naturally, it had the role of Huo's and Yunduan company. With this background, no matter what he did, the other companies would give him face, but more important was his ability. Just the name Huo Liancheng was enough to make people bitter. Jian Dongming suddenly felt that he still wanted to fool Huo Liancheng. What a stupid decision. The sweat on his forehead grew more and more. He could not get rid of it no matter what. Even though the man in front of him was so young and nominally his son-in-law, Jian Dongming had the feeling that he was the younger generation. He could not take it anymore. He should just throw caution to buy. Jian Dongming took a deep breath and suddenly raised his eyelids. He said in a deep voice, "All right, I admit that I was not good at managing the company. I owe the bank 10 million, my company war. Now the bank is forcing me to return the money. If I can't return the money, I will sue. I will go to jail. I am really at a dead end." When he said this, Jian Dongming looked at Jian Yun again. He was no longer as domineering as before. Instead, he had a dispirited and fawning expression. "I have been bad to you and your daughter all these years. I am the bastard. But just treat it as me pampering you for the past 20 years. Can you help me this once?" Jian Yun raised her head and looked at Jian Dongming. Facing such a humble Jian Dongming, she did not feel happy at all. Instead, she felt sad. It had been more than 6 years. Jian Dongming was no longer the high-spirited and tall father she remembered. However, his hair was already white in his early 50s. The skin on his face was also relaxed. His eyes and the corner of his mouth were drooping. His eyes were turbid, making people feel that he was not energetic at first glance. Jian Yun could not help but think of what Lawyer Lei had told her. The reason Jian Dongming had lost the company in these few years was because Lin Rong had hooked up with him. Initially, she was skeptical, but now it seemed that Jian Dongming's spirit, which was obviously not right, had told her the truth. "Yunduo, help me. Just this once. I promise that I will never come to find you again." Jian Dongming did not care about his identity and reached out to pull Jian Yun. However, when he reached out his hand, his arm was exposed. Jian Yun's eyes inadvertently swept over and her pupils suddenly shrank. She grabbed Jian Dongming's wrist and stared at the needle-like eyes on his arm. The expression on her small face became unusually serious. "Dad, you actually..." Jian Yun's heart suddenly jumped. She originally thought that Jian Dongming was just sucking opium, but she did not expect that it had already developed into injections. In this case, his addiction must be very great. "Yunduo, don't think about it blindly. I just got sick and went to the hospital to get injections." Jian Dongming's expression suddenly changed. He looked at Huo Liancheng nervously and tried his best to cover it up. Jian Dongming knew very well that addicts were not popular no matter where they were. It was the same in business. That was why he could not let others know that he was a drug addict, especially at the moment. Then he really had no last hope. Jian Yun clenched her teeth tightly. She did not know what to say. 6 years of not listening and not asking. The moment she called, it was to force her mother to sign a divorce. She never would have thought that Jian Dongming himself was actually immersed in that kind of thing. This way, no matter how much money he had, it would not be enough for him to squander. "Mr. Jane," she said, "today is not the time to talk about acquisitions. Come to my office tomorrow." Huo Liancheng finally spoke. His words were like the sound of nature to Jian Dongming. Good, thank you, Mr. Huo." Jian Dongming's face was full of smiles. He kept thanking Huo Liancheng. This humble attitude made Jian Yun feel uncomfortable, as if something was blocking her heart. "Then see you tomorrow." Huo Liancheng stood up from the sofa and extended his hand to Jian Dongming. Chapter 365. 6. Parent non-recognition. Jian Dongming was stunned for a moment. He was overwhelmed by the favor and quickly reached out his hands to hold Huo Liancheng's hand. His face was full of excitement. All right, Mr. Huo, see you tomorrow. Huo Liancheng nodded. Jian Yun could not stand Jian Dongming's subservient attitude at this moment. She suddenly stood up and left without saying a word. Jian Dongming was immersed in the great joy that he was about to turn over. He did not have the time to care about Jian Yun's reaction. He pretended to be concerned in order to not make Huo Liancheng dislike her. He said, Mr. Huo, Yunduo is a stubborn girl. How can you forgive her? Huo Liancheng retracted his gaze from Jian Yun's departing back. He nodded indifferently at Jian Dongming and turned around to follow Jian Yun. Jian Dongming narrowed his eyes and looked pleased. Someone had come to greet him. These people were all acting according to the situation. When they saw that Jian Dongming was actually Huo Liancheng's father-in-law, they were all fawning over him. Those who didn't know Jian Dongming surrounded him. These few years, Jian Dongming's business had failed. His old friends did not pay attention to him. Suddenly, being complimented by so many people made him float in the air. His back was straight. There were people who wanted to see Huo Liancheng and collaborate with the Huos. When they asked Jian Dongming for help, he started to talk big. He patted his chest and promised all of them. Mr. Li, who was with Lin Lanlan, also pulled Lin Lanlan over. He had just heard Lin Lanlan call Jian Dongming Papa and heard Lin Lanlan say that she and Mrs. Huo were half-sisters. Mr. Li was very excited and thought that he had found a treasure. He even had ideas to go home and divorce the tigress at home and marry Lin Lanlan. This way, wouldn't he and Huo Liancheng become in-laws? In that case, just based on this relationship, in the entire Qinghu city and even the entire Huadong region, who wouldn't give him face? It was only a matter of time before his business expanded. Lin Lanlan only saw that Mr. Li's eyes were shining. If it was in the past, she would definitely take the opportunity to say nice things and make Mr. Li happy. This way, she could get gifts from him and return them to the counter to exchange for money. But today, Lin Lanlan was not interested at all. At this moment, all she was thinking about was Huo Liancheng. Compared to Huo Liancheng, he was that model figure. Lin Lanlan felt that Mr. Li's chubby and round belly was comparable to being pregnant for 6 months. It made her want to vomit. Also, there was the perfume smell on Mr. Li's body. It could not compare to Huo Liancheng's natural hormonal smell. She had been mesmerized by the scent when she was standing next to Huo Liancheng. Her heart hadn't calmed down yet. Unlike the lively hall at the moment, Jian Yun came out of the banquet hall and went straight to the garden. The night wind was cool, and the roses in the bushes were blooming. The fragrance came and calmed her restless heart a little. A large hand wrapped around her slender waist from behind. Jian Yun did not look back and knew that it was Huo Liancheng. The aura on his body was so special. Are you angry? Huo Liancheng asked Jian Yun in a low voice. He rubbed his chin against her ear. No. Jian Yun shrank back because of the heat from Huo Liancheng's breath. She pursed her lips and turned her head slightly to look at him. Why do you ask? Why are you here if you're not angry? Huo Liancheng asked. Huo Liancheng kissed Jian Yun on the cheek. Jian Yun lowered her eyes and was silent for a while before she sighed. I feel a little embarrassed. Shame? Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows. My father was not like this before. Jian Yun lowered her head even lower and her voice became depressed and lonely. In the past, he was very positive and had a backbone. He taught me what I wanted since I was young. I have to rely on myself to earn money. I cannot reach out and ask others for it. Dignity is the most important thing. But now, Huo Liancheng wrapped his arm around Jian Yun's body and made her face him. He hooked her chin and made her look at him. I thought you were angry at me for not saying anything and making your father lose face. Jian Yun heard him and sneered. She rolled her eyes at Huo Liancheng. If I didn't have this kind of eyesight, how could I follow you? Oh, Huo Liancheng's interest was piqued. What do you mean? If I were you, I wouldn't give him a chance. If he didn't tell me the truth, he would have put on a white glove and gotten addicted to that poison. Giving him money would only harm him. Jian Yun said seriously. When she said this, she stopped. Her eyelashes trembled, and a trace of confusion flashed across her eyes. She said, Actually, it is impossible for me not to hate him. I have thought countless times about what kind of scene it would be when I see him again. I feel that I definitely don't want to talk to him anymore, just like how he treated me and my mother in the past. But today, when I saw his head full of white hair and age, I felt pity for him again. What a conflicting mentality. Don't think so much. Poor people must have something hateful. Even if he's your father, you don't need to feel any guilt. Didn't you comfort me like this before? Huo Liancheng stroked Jian Yun's cheek and said gently, Parents are independent individuals to their children, or children to their parents. They can't ask you to give them all back just because he gave birth to you and raised you. Jian Yun nodded. I know. I understand the logic, but when it's my turn, I always feel conflicted. Conflict what? Huo Liancheng asked. I'm worried. Helping him is harming him, and that thing is a bottomless pit. It's hard to get rid of it if you touch it. But if you don't help him, then... Jian Yun bit her lip. She did not finish her sentence. Don't worry. I have a heart. Huo Liancheng pulled Jian Yun's cheek and smiled gently. he asked. You have not said yet. How can you have eyes? Jianyun looked at Huo Liancheng from the corner of her eye and curled the corner of her mouth. She said, I have long seen through it. If you don't want to help him, you won't give him a chance to sit down. Nonsense. Why does it sound like I don't know my relatives? No matter what, he's your father and my father-in-law. I'll give him some face. Huo Liancheng was not happy. Really? Really? Jianyun looked skeptical. She knew very well that Huo Liancheng was a cold person. He was so cold to his biological parents, let alone his so-called father-in-law, who had never interacted with each other before. Of course. Huo Liancheng raised his eyebrows. All right, he said. I believe you. Jianyun thought for a while and covered her face with her hands. She said in a muffled voice, but I still feel embarrassed. My father clearly thinks that you are easy to fool with your stupid money. If he wants to get a sum from you, he will leave. Okay, my money is yours. Just take it as repaying his kindness of nurturing for so many years. Don't think so much. Huo Liancheng took Jianyun's hand that covered her face and said in amusement, Why are you so clear with me?